Welcome to Retirement Revised, where we challenge the traditional idea of retirement and explore new ways to make this stage of life more adventurous, fulfilling, and financially free. Today, we have an incredible guest who has done just that, Kyria from the Walking Thomas Guy. In 2024, Kyria made the bold decision to retire early and embrace a life of full time solo travel. With an impressive journey spanning approximately 60 countries, she shares her experiences on the Walking Thomas Guide, where she provides insights on slow travel, budgeting, and financial independence.
Kyria is redefining what retirement looks like, and we are excited to have her on the show today.
Kyria, welcome. And if you can just tell us a little bit about your background and where you are right now.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Kyria. I'm from California, and right now I am in Krakow, Poland. And let's see a little bit about myself. I basically grew up in a small town in California, and so even like the first move I made to college was a big change for me. Being in a bigger town and everything. And so then I'm trying to think of where I actually got started traveling. My first traveling on my own was actually a flight I took to see my grandmother when I was about 11. And I was by myself on the plane. My mom put me on the plane and I went to see her. And I really liked it. I mean, of course, at that point, I didn't have to plan anything myself. But starting off, my first planning myself was I decided after taking a semester of French that I was going to go live in France for a few months for the summer and work, which was a very eye-opening experience. Basically, I mean, I made all the mistakes. I don't think I had like my paperwork in order ahead of time. So I remember driving around San Francisco trying to get the right, visa and stamp and this and that and the other thing to be able to work in France for a summer. And then I took two huge suitcases that I had to actually carry with my, like pick up and carry because they didn't have rolling wheels. And I had to transfer going through Paris to get to Bordeaux, which is where I was going. And I had to like drag the suitcases through the turnstile. So anyway, I did everything wrong. I barely spoke French. I was super uncomfortable all the time, but it made me learn a lot about myself. And so that kind of started my love for travel. And so basically after that, I just would work enough to make enough money to travel. I went and lived in London for a little while, lived in Istanbul for a little while, did a round the world trip on points, which is a whole other story. All of those basically made me realize that this is something I wanted to do full time. After I came back from the round world trip, I got a job and just basically started saving up to be able to quit my job for good and travel all the time.
Excellent. Well, I guess we're going to get right into the questions. So many people think that retirement is all about slowing down, but you took a little bit of a different path. So now that you're retired, kind of what does retirement look like for you?
I think retirement to me is the ability to just do whatever you want, whenever you want. So that can look like obviously a lot of different things. But for me, even though I've been to a lot of countries already, I still have a bunch that I still want to go to. And I even want to revisit a lot of the ones that I went to when I was traveling a little bit faster. And so I think that the possibilities are endless. So what retirement looks like for me is staying active and learning new things and seeing new places, new cultures, and I don't know, meeting new people. And I don't know, it's just it's still a little bit of a work in progress to be honest. So that's what it looks like now. We'll see where it goes from here.
It's always constantly evolving, right? Like the more you see, the more people you meet, the more places you go, things change and your visions change. So I find that for us anyways, it's always modifying itself, what our vision is for retirement.
Well, I think even though we're older now, we still don't know what we don't know. I mean, I don't think that'll ever change. And so I keep learning things that I didn't know about. And that just opens new doors and new possibilities every day, basically. So
Yeah.
that's part of the fun of it.
So, what was your mindset shift from a traditional career path to financial independence? And was there a defining moment that made you commit to this particular journey?
I don't know if there was, well, actually, I'll take that back. Yeah, I would say yes. So basically, I was working in finance and I kind of knew that I wanted to retire early and I thought that I would do it at 40.
Mhm.
And so I turned 40 in 2018 but I was really liking my job and things were going well. And so I kind of decided, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready to make the change at this time.
Mhm.
And then in 2019, I had a friend who was 57, got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and died within like 6 months.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic happened. And then I had two friends whose mothers both passed away, one after the other in 2022 and 2023. And at that point, I said, you know what? Life is too short. I don't need to keep working. I don't really need to keep working to make more money. I'm just going to go for it. So I guess that was the defining moment where I think you can easily drag your feet for a long time and push it back one more year and push it back one more year. But
Yeah.
that kind of made me realize that I just don't know how much longer I have. And so I'm going to make the most of it.
Yeah. I think that's it's a common thread through most of the people that we speak to anyways. That's a common thread in their journey is this idea of time. And we don't know how much time we have and tends to be some loss involved in that. And that was definitely the case for Jean and I, right? Our parents, we've each had a parent that died quite young and didn't get to enjoy their retirement. And we had friends that passed away younger in life. And the fact that we don't know how much time there is for any of us and we want to be able to enjoy our life while we can seems to be a very common thread throughout the financial independence and early retirement community, I guess. It becomes more important to utilize the time you have rather than save for a day in the future kind of mentality.
I agree, but it is hard to make that shift because that is what my mindset was for a very long time. And even not just for retirement necessarily, but even just I'm going to not spend money on a coffee today because I'm going to use that money someday in the future for whatever. And so it is hard to make the switch. But I think what I always tell myself is if I don't like it, if I get bored, if I'm not satisfied with this, I can change. I can go back to working if that's what I want to do or whatever that looks like. But I think you have to try it to figure out if you
Yeah. It's funny when you say that because people usually they have that perception that they see as a failure kind of going back to work if it doesn't work at all, right? But it's just adapted to the new reality that we are going to end up facing. It doesn't mean that I want to trade what we have done up to this point. It's almost 1 year since we stopped working because I had to come back. If we had to come back, I don't have any plans with that like the guardrails in place, but it will not be a problem at all. It just needs to experience and see what is out there.
Yeah, I think what you said is uh, really good. It's you have to try, right? If you don't try, you're never going to know if this life is for you or if early retirement is for you. And maybe it's not, and that's okay. And you can go back and find a job that you love and you can work at as doing whatever you want and know that you're still financially secure enough, to be able to just enjoy the job that you're doing, which is also completely fine.
Yes. How did you kind of prepare yourself to that change, to that leap, saying, you know what, yes, I'm going to go for it. But did you question yourself and say, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that at all?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Of course, there's so many doubts, right? Because you're making a big change and also had a hard time and still do a little bit with how people perceive me. So when I meet people, even here where I'm traveling, they'll say, well, what do you do? Are you working remotely? Like, what are you doing? And I say, well, I'm retired. And they just look at me like, what? Like, and then I do think, well, do they think that I'm lazy or I mean whatever the perception is, I don't really know what they think, but I still do have doubts about that. Like before I retired, I thought, well, will I be bored? Will I have enough to do? Will I like it? What am I doing? I'm doing this huge thing, right? I'm selling my house, I'm getting rid of all my stuff, I'm quitting my job, I'm moving away from my friends and my normal routines. And what if I hate it? But like I said before, if you hate it, then you go back, you move back to your place you were before and you start meeting back up with your old friends. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. You have to try, right? So yeah, lots of doubt.
Yeah. So we all have this idea of what retirement is, how old we're supposed to be when we retire, what we're supposed to be doing in retirement. And the fact that we're all doing it at a very young age comparatively to a lot of people, it, it's hard for them to understand. Like, what do you mean you don't have to work anymore? How did you do this? The questions just start to come fast and furious, we find once we say we're retired. Do you get a lot of questions? How did you do that? Why did you do that? What does your day look like?
Yeah, what do you do all day? That's very common, right? Like, because I think you think, oh, I'm just sitting around and I don't know, eating bonbons and I don't guess. Yeah. But, but the beautiful part about it is that you have the freedom to do whatever you want. If you want to sit around and eat bonbons, then do that. But I mean, you can structure your day however you want it.
Well, and I guess that's a good segue into what does your retirement look like? What have you been up to? Because you retired last year, correct? In April?
Been almost a year now.
I know.
Congratulations, in a way. So, what have you
Yeah.
been up to for your retirement? What does it look like for you so far?
Yeah, it's kind of changed a little bit. So last year, after I retired, I jumped on a bike and rode from California to Nova Scotia. And I didn't go like the straightest, fastest way. So I went kind of up to Vancouver and then over and then back down to New Mexico and then back up.
Wow.
Uh, so that was different, obviously, than what I'm doing right now. But so that one was kind of like each day you have something different, which was an adventure in itself. But definitely you can get a little bit of decision fatigue from that kind of lifestyle. And so since then, I've been traveling. I spent about 2 months in Washington. So I stayed in Seattle for about a month and a half doing a house sitting job. That was really fun. That was kind of nice segue into slow travel because I got to get to know the area and people and everything like that. I had a dog that I was walking, so I got to know the neighbors a little bit,
Yeah.
and then I started traveling abroad. So it's been changing. And so there's definitely ups and downs, I think, to each part of it. And I'm still learning how I want to structure it in the future. But so far, it's been good.
That sounds like an epic adventure, riding across North America. That's good for you. How did you have to do any training? Like, were you training for this particular thing prior to deciding to retire and do it, or did you just say, like, this sounds like a great idea, I'm going to give it a try?
Yeah, I think pretty much the latter, except I mean, I did buy a bike, but I had no idea what I was doing. I bought a bike, didn't really know like what bike to buy. So I just bought a bike and bought a few bags. And then the training was pretty much on the road. So
Yeah, that is awesome. I don't know whether we could do that. We did the Camino with no training, and it was hard. So I can't imagine cycling across the US and Canada.
I know. And how long did it take for you to go all the way to Nova Scotia?
about 7 months total. But I stopped and visited people and stayed with friends. It was great, actually. I mean, I ended up probably staying with like 5 or 6 different friends and meeting people on the road that I would stay with. There's also a network of cycling called Warm Showers where you can stay with people who are cyclists. So I met people that way. And yeah, so just it was really fun. I suggest you try it.
Yeah, I don't know. I have some cycling stories that didn't end well.
We should tell her about one of them.
Oh my gosh. There's a big one. I used to work as a police officer, so I did a section of my time as a crew officer and we rode bicycles around the city. Well, I hadn't ridden a bike in 20 years and you know the saying it's like riding a bike, right? You never forget. Well, you can forget how to ride a bike and I did. In the middle of one of the busiest cities in this the streets in the city, I went flying off my bike. My pedal hit the ground. Off I went into a tree, into a planter, wearing a giant yellow police jacket. It was not a good scene. No, bicycles and me don't really go well together.
Well, I fell really badly one time on that trip. I was in, where was I? Montana. And I was going down this hill. It was just a gravel dirt road, but it was a dirt road with gravel, like a layer of gravel on it. And I was trying to avoid a rut. So I took a fast turn and I went flying right off the edge. I mean, it was a mountain road. I literally went flying right off the edge and into the rocks and bushes. And luckily, my bike also went flying, but separately from me, and it hit a bush. And so it didn't land right on top of me, but it was like literally like right, like inches from my face. And I was fine. And the bike was fine. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. And I'm not like totally injured or whatever. So
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you didn't hurt yourself. That doesn't sound like a great fall.
yeah.
Well, we've already started to talk a little bit about your solo travels, but many people are really interested in solo travel, but they kind of worry about things like loneliness, safety. How have you adapted to life on the road alone?
Yeah, like I said, I kind of started this way from the beginning, and that trip was a disaster, but in a good way. So I think doing that and kind of making mistakes right at the very beginning helped me a lot to know that you're going to make mistakes. Things aren't going to always go perfectly. There are going to be moments, of downtime or loneliness or whatever, but there are tricks to kind of avoid that a little bit. So as far as safety goes, I think a lot of times the news kind of overblows some of the negative things about a place, and so not to say that I don't want to be safe, but I think that all of that just needs to be taken with a grain of salt. So a lot of places that you may consider unsafe are actually perfectly safe. Maybe even the city that you're already in is more unsafe than some of the places abroad. So I think that you just need to kind of get a mindset that it's not going to be as dangerous or difficult as you may think. But you always have to kind of watch your back. And I do think that planning and preparation helps me a lot. I mean, I'm a planner, makes me feel a lot more comfortable if I just have things kind of figured out ahead of time. And you can't figure out everything ahead of time, but just knowing a little bit about things. So I might like look up places and see what the safety index is, or, look at videos on YouTube to see if other solo travelers have gone there and how they feel, or if it makes you more comfortable. If people speak English, if that's what you're worried about, then you would just see if people speak English in the area. Just things like that, I think have helped a lot as far as figuring out the perception of safety and whether or not that's true or not, and then also just being prepared in case something happens. So you can look up where the hospital is, whatever the thing you're worried about. You can plan ahead for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, we get that too, right? You get the warnings from people, oh my goodness, don't go there. It's too dangerous. Or why are you thinking of going there? It's the same when we came to Argentina. We met a bunch of Argentinians in Spain. And when we told them we were coming to Buenos Aires, it was like, oh my goodness, you have to be careful. Don't carry your cell phones. Don't wear jewelry. But we've had no problems. I think a lot of just common sense and an awareness of your surroundings really does go a long way. And I think that that's the same regardless if you're in a couple or if you're an individual traveling or in your home city, right?
I'm from San Francisco, and you would do the same thing in San Francisco as you would abroad. You would make sure that you don't have your cell phone in your hand if you're on the train right next to the door, or you don't keep your cell phone in your back pocket hanging out. I actually saw a guy yesterday with his wallet and his cell phone in his two back pockets, and they were both kind of sticking out like an inch, where you could just so easily just grab it. I mean, not that I would, obviously, but I just felt like that guy should put his cell phone in his front pocket.
And then speaking of, then do you have any surprises of as a solo traveler that you were not expect at all?
I mean, I don't think so. Of course, having to plan everything on your own means that obviously I'm not going to get everything right. So I guess that would be kind of a surprise. Sometimes I just didn't know to look up something. Whereas if you have two people, you have twice as many people, trying to figure it out. So it probably helped a little bit. But it's just the same as traveling with somebody else, except have to figure it all out on your own, basically.
Yeah. And do you find that that takes, because planning is, we find that it's a lot of time and work to plan, and there's two of us. How much time does it take for you to sit down and plan out where you want to be for the next 5 or 6 months or a year?
I I would guess it's actually easier because when I have to coordinate with somebody else or worry about what they want to do, or what their fears are or whatever, it's actually harder. So if it's just me, then I know like, well, I don't want to do that, so I don't do it, right? I don't have to discuss it or anything. I mean, I have family coming to visit me in a couple of months, and it's like just those like week that they're going to be there is a lot more planning than the times that I'm alone. So it actually, I think, is easier if I don't have someone else. I like planning. So, yes, it does take a lot of time. And sometimes there's so many possibilities. So, that's the hard part, right?
Yeah. If you have options, it's hard to narrow things down.
It is hard to narrow things down. If, as far as like, once it comes to, okay, well, I know I'm going to be here. What do I want to do there? It's a lot easier, I think.
Oh, you know what? I never really thought about that, but I think that's a very valid point. It's probably a lot easier as an individual and quicker. Because I know if we're looking at accommodations, I'm like, okay, Gian, what do you think of this place? And he's like, well, I don't know if I like that. Okay, so then you move to the next one. Whereas maybe I would have been fine with it, but he's not happy or vice versa. So you spend more time trying to find the ideal spot or something that's going to be a good compromise for two people. Whereas it's just you, you're like, yeah, that's good. Like, it's good.
Right. Whereas though there is a flip side to that as something like, how do I get from A to B? It would be nice to have two people because then you could split it up and say, okay, well, I'm figuring out the transportation and to this place, and I'm figuring out the transportation to this place. But as far as deciding, on a place or where to go or what to do there, I think it's sometimes easier.
So, what have you found to be the biggest challenge and the biggest reward of solo travel?
I think the biggest challenge, maybe just what I was talking about, is yes, it's easier because it's just me making decisions. But on the other hand, it would be nice. For instance, I'm kind of shy. Sometimes I don't really want to go up to somebody and ask directions if it's in a different language or whatever. It would be nice to have someone who we could take turns. So that's a challenge. But then again, like it also makes me stronger. And then once I do it, I feel better and then I can do it the next time. So I've probably grown more as far as that goes because I'm by myself. So it's both a challenge and also it's good.
Makes you step outside of your comfort zone, right? Kind of push your own boundaries and you tend to grow more and more the more you can do that, right?
Right. Well, when I was actually in Argentina, I was traveling with a friend of mine and we both spoke a little bit of Spanish. So we would kind of take turns going up to ask the guy, when the next bus is or whatever that question was, which was nice. And also, if we were having a conversation with someone, I might understand a word that he didn't understand. And so we could kind of fill in the blanks for each other. So that was nice. So now it's just me doing that. So that, I guess, is a little bit of a challenge.
Do you find that you get fatigued trying to figure all of this out on your own? Can it get tiring at times? Do you just sometimes need to take some time and just be by yourself and give your brain a little bit of a break from everything?
Definitely. So the bike trip is a great example of that. I mean, pretty much every day I was on the move. So every day I had to figure out, how do I get to the next place? Where is the next place? Is there a grocery store there? Is there accommodation? And where am I going to sleep? And then I had to book it. So that's like every single day, right? Which gets kind of tiring. So definitely a little bit of decision fatigue. And so sometimes I would just get to a place. I was in Ottawa for 2 days, and basically I just like laid around and then would get food and then laid around, and everyone's like, you didn't do this and that. I said, no, I just needed a break. So yeah, so now I kind of plan that in a little bit. And I know that I'm not going to be out doing something every single moment of every single day. You need to have time for sure.
That's a bit of a misconception, I think, for the entire full time travel or nomadic sort of lifestyle, is people have this perception that every day is filled with all these crazy adventures and you're out there seeing sights or visiting museums or where it's not like that. You're living a regular life other places in the world. And do you go and see these places? For sure, you go and visit museums or iconic places and stuff, but it's not every day all day out sightseeing and traveling because that can get exhausting. Yes.
One of my favorite things is actually after I've been in a place for a couple of weeks and I don't have that pressure to myself to do everything. And I can just go out, take a walk, buy a baguette, whatever the thing is, like read my book, sit by the river, look at people walking by, like the things that you would do on a normal day in your normal life. But when you're traveling at first, you do feel a little bit of pressure to like, I must see things because I'm in this new place. But it's kind of nice once that kind of ramps down and you can just be a normal person. Yeah.
Now, let me ask one question. How do you feel? I mean, by traveling solo and everything, do you find like the sense of community? How do you feel about finding people that, is also join what you are doing now? Do you have this sense of community as a solo traveler?
Yeah, I think so. You do have to do a little bit of work to find it, but there are so many there's meetup groups in pretty much every place. And there's a thing called blah blah language, for instance, and that's pretty much everywhere. It's basically just people getting together and talking. So it's usually there's an English one. So if you want to meet up with people, you can meet up with people. There are Facebook groups. What are some of the other ones? I mean, there's so many different ways to meet people. I don't think it's really a problem if you're willing to go and try a little bit. But yeah, it's hard because I have to meet new people every single time. But you guys have to do that too. I mean, it's not just solo travelers who have to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm sure the two of you get tired of just each other's company, but you do have to work to find other people, right?
We've decided that every year we're going to take a vacation from each other. We're going to take a week where we just go and do our own thing for a week and we can come back, you know, because 24/7 is a lot of time, 365 days a year to spend with a person. But I love you.
I know. I know, that's funny. And by the way, all of the tips and websites and everything that we're
Mm.
talking on this video and also on the podcast, it will be available on the show note. So we can rest assured that we'll have that available to you as well.
Yeah. And I mentioned to you just before the show, Kyria, that there was another app that somebody had just introduced to us was Nomad Mania. So if there's any other travelers out there listening, really, it's a great place also to connect with people. And they do meet us all over the world as well. So do you think long-term solo travel is for everyone, or who do you think wouldn't necessarily enjoy this type of lifestyle?
I think that obviously it's not for everyone, but who wouldn't enjoy it? Maybe if you're not willing to put yourself out there a little bit, and that can go in so many different avenues. But I think you might get a little bit bored with your own self, your own company. But you can do tours, you can do groups. There's groups like I forget like Intrepid. So I've never done it, but because that's not really my style. But I think a lot of solo travelers do that, or cruises, like solo cruises or whatnot. There's so many different ways to keep yourself occupied if you're like a more social person, for instance. But if you don't try these things, then you're, of course, probably going to get bored, right? So I think that you have to be a little bit open to meeting people. And there's also, I don't know if there's one of these for men, but there's group on Facebook called Host a Sister. And essentially it's a bunch of solo women usually. Sometimes they're together with other people, but usually it's solo women and they're just looking for someone to hang out with in a city. And so you just post where you're going to be, what the dates are, and then people can say, "Yeah, I'll meet for coffee." And I've actually met a few people that way, and it's all great. And usually they're locals. So a lot of times I'll get to know the local area by meeting somebody that way.
Let's get into some of the other practical details. Let's talk about money planning and all those kinds of interesting facts. So, what kind of financial strategies do you use in order to allow you to travel long term to sustain this type of lifestyle? Do you have a strict budget, or is it something more flexible? How do you work it?
Yeah, so I do have a budget. It isn't exactly strict. I mean, I want to try to stay under $2,500 a month, but I'm okay with if an opportunity comes up or if I'm spending time with people, because that's usually when I spend more money. It's okay for me to go a little over. So this is an experience, and I don't want to cheap out just because
Right.
I'm trying to stay to a certain budget. I can always save money and in, the future if I need to by house sitting or staying with family or going home for a while or whatever the thing is, or staying in a country that's cheaper. So I have a budget, but if it's okay if I don't exactly stick to it. As far as financial strategies, there's a few things I do. I basically have dividends. So that's kind of how I fund my travels. But I have all my credit cards set to pay on the same day. And then I basically keep most of my money in a high yield savings account so that I am still making money off of it. And then, so basically, I pay everything on the 4th. I move all the money on the 1st. That way I can pay all my credit cards. And then I don't have any money sitting in my checking account, which makes basically nothing. So there's certain little things like that that I think make sense for me. And it makes it easier to keep track of also. Because I think when you're working and you have like your money coming in every month, it's different. And now you kind of have to manage it yourself. So I want to try to still maximize my dollar as much as I can.
Like that. And I think we're stealing that idea from you. Because right now our credit cards just whatever the due date is. Yeah, that's the way. So we have our money in the checking account just waiting for the date to come, then it gets withdrawn. But I like the idea of having them all on the same date. You put the money in for whatever that date is, they all get paid out, and the rest of your money is sitting in your high interest account.
I know. I saw you're going to see your.
And I'm going to give you a discount.
Yeah. The imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? So go for it. See that?
That's part, right? And I think that's why we really like talking to other people because you do learn different tips and tricks, right? That when you think about it, like that makes total sense. What am I doing? Why am I doing it the way we're doing it? That doesn't seems all over.
It doesn't help at all. Yeah.
Yeah, staying organized is key, and I think that that is the like
The simple solution.
it's a great way to do
Totally same.
organized and it's logical. Logical. I love it. Yeah.
Well, so I also have always tracked my spending. So that's something I do now, obviously, still, but I always have. Not only to see where my money was going, but also to see how much I would need after I retired. So it's, a twofold strategy. So I think that's very important for anybody who's thinking about, well,
Yeah.
for anybody in general, but if you're thinking about retiring or trying to travel full time or anything like that, you kind of need to have an idea of what you're going to spend. And I think a lot of people get it wrong. As far as if you were right now, if you didn't track your spending and right now you were to ask somebody, well, how much do you spend every month? They would probably get it wrong. Right. So I think knowing really helps a lot to planning for the future. Yeah, that's something I find.
Yeah. So if you think about talking about budgets and everything, but how do you manage your taxes and even logistics like mail and stuff like that? It being away for a long period of time.
Yeah. So my taxes, I am going to have to do those from abroad, which that's not that hard with TurboTax, basically. And luckily, I mean, it's gotten easier. I remember the first time I traveled and I was away for tax time and trying to figure out how I was going to do my taxes when you still had to like sign things and whatnot. That was a lot different. But now it's e-sign and everything. So that's pretty easy. Health insurance. Well, last year was a little bit different because a lot of the nomad or, more nomad insurances won't let you be in the US for more than a certain amount of days. And I was traveling kind of back and forth from Canada to the US. So I had Cigna, Global, and I've just switched to Genki. It's a lot cheaper. And now that I'm not in the US anymore, it makes more sense for me. As far as mail, I'm very, very lucky to have my mother who they would care about me. I know. But I don't really get much in the mail aside from like right now, obviously, because it's almost tax time. All that stuff is often sent, even though I have it online. So, she's constantly saying, like, do you need this? And I'm like, no, I have it. I can just download it. So I don't need it.
We also have amazing family in Canada. So thank you, Gail, Leanne, and Dad for managing our mail system back home. I want to circle back to when you were talking about tracking your spending and stuff. You've been tracking your spending obviously for several years, but do you find that as last year sort of happened and now you're moving through more of a slow travel type of an existence, is your budget changing? Do you notice that you're spending more or less as a slow traveler versus a fast traveler? How is it looking for you?
That's an interesting question. And that was a question I kind of had for myself as well, because I used last year as kind of an idea of how to get the $2,500 budget. I wasn't really sure how last year was going to go because moving around a lot every day and then not being able to buy like staple groceries and use them for a month made it so it was a little more expensive. And also I ate out more because I was moving from place to place more. So I probably spent about $2,700 a month last year in fast travel. And so far this year, I'm okay with the 25. I guess it's a little cheaper to slow travel, but it's not that much of a difference. But of course, if I was fast traveling in Europe, that might be a whole different story.
True. Yeah, things can get because it's hotel rooms and like those seem to be more expensive rather than I think do you use Airbnb? Maybe that's a great question as well. Like when you're planning out your stays, are you more like a Airbnb get the long-term discount type of a person? Are you a hotel guest house? That kind of how do you plan your accommodation?
It's a little bit of everything. So I use trusted house sitters sometimes if I can. It's not as common in Europe as it is in the US and Canada. So it's a little bit harder. Um, Unless you go to UK, that's a little more common. But so trusted house sitters, Airbnb for long-term stays, sometimes booking. It's so weird. Like the same property will be on Airbnb and booking, but yet there's different rules or maybe even different prices sometimes. Kind of odd. And then if I'm traveling a little faster, I might fill in the gaps with like IHG because I have points. I can just do a 4-night stay in a place and pay with points. So it really kind of depends.
That's actually a great segue. So I think that you love points and miles as much as we love points and miles. So what are your go-to points and miles categories, I guess? Are you a convertible currency type of a person? Are you a loyal hotel brand or airline brand type of a person? What do you like to do?
Yeah. So I started doing points and miles in 2004. And at the time I was working, um, traveling for work. So I'm from San Francisco. So United is a hub there. And so I had a United card and a Marriott card were my first 2 points cards. And I mean, over the years, I've basically the around the world travel, we stayed in a lot of Marriott. And the around the world ticket was booked on miles. So like those points have been great. However, United miles have been devalued a lot over the years. And I just read an article about Marriott and it's also being devalued a lot. It's been devalued a lot, but it's even again is going to be devalued again. They just did another announcement about some of the points changing. So probably like 2 years ago, I decided to switch to a convertible currency. I still have the Marriott card because I get one free night every year. So there's no harm, no foul in that one. I got rid of the United card. I just wasn't really using it. And then the points just weren't as valuable as they used to be. So convertible currency is
Which are your two, if you had only two credit cards that you could use, what would be your two go-to credit cards?
I would say I'm going to kind of like back this up a little. If you're just starting out in points and miles, I think the Chase Preferred, Sapphire Preferred is the best one. I have the reserve. I'm not sure if it's worth it at this point. So I would say I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one to everyone, but I think the Sapphire Preferred is great. It only costs $95 a year. It gives you $50 credit. It has 3 times dining. It's convertible currency. I think that that's a good starter card. So that's probably the one I would recommend to other people. And then I also like the IHG card. I just think it gives you the status, it gives you the fourth night free. I think like, and plus it has the good, I can't remember if it's 5 times groceries, but I think it's 5 times groceries. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the one free night, I mean, it's basically a no brainer. Even if you don't use it at all, you still get one free night for $95. I mean, so, but I do think it has benefit other than that.
Yeah, what we have been trying to do, even when we talk about money diversification, is kind of diversify ourselves, even with different credit cards, because we have people avoid as well. So Marriott really, really bad. So we don't like what you guys are doing, but having the IHG and having the Hyatt, and sometimes when you go to those places, depending on where you are around the world, you're gonna end up finding more Marriott hotels rather than IHG hotels. And then if you are in Asia, it might be the opposites, right? So we always try to balance and learn as we go.
Yeah. Do you find that points and miles have sort of become a form of currency for you? Like, have they really helped you offset some of your travel costs throughout the years?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I used the rest of my United points to buy all my flight to Europe, and also I had a friend and who her 2 daughters come with me, so theirs was a round trip and mine was a one way, and I paid for all of them with points. So that was probably like $4,000 worth of air, flights basically.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So yeah, and aside from that, I mean, over the years, I don't even know how many dollars I've saved. That round the world ticket would probably be like $5,000 easily. I don't know for sure. Yeah. So yeah, tens of thousands at least.
Yeah. They're more powerful, I think. I think more people need to realize how powerful they really could be to offset some of their costs if they want to travel. And even if you're just at home in your daily life, points or cashback type cards can really help you save money and achieve financial independence a little bit sooner.
I totally agree with you. Even if you're not traveling, and I'm sure all my friends are so tired of me saying this, so I'm glad you guys are copacetic. But even if you're not traveling, even just a cashback card, you can be smart about what cashback card to use. So even just that, I think is useful.
I mean, we have something similar in Canada, but we were saying that even the build card, which is a low fee credit card, you're gonna pay rent. And then, though, depending on where you live, even if the place that you're having, like the landlord, they don't accept credit cards, you can still mail a check to them. And as a result, you are gonna end up paying your rent and getting something back.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So sometimes I feel like people are afraid, or maybe credit cards, they have a bad word out there, but it's actually the opposite. It's just on how you learn on how to use them strategically to benefit you.
Yeah. And as long as you're paying your balance, right? That's the key.
That's the key.
I'm freezing the wine.
I really looked into that built card, but because I wasn't paying rent, it was different. But I keep trying to convince my friends who are paying rent to get it. So I'm like, it has no fee too. Like,
I guess calories for everybody. Like if every dollar that leaves your bank account needs to be earning you something more than whatever it is you're buying, whether you're paying a bill or you're buying a coffee, like make that money earn more back for you. It's a game. Let's win at the game.
Yeah.
but it seems complicated to people. And so I think just like I said, the Chase Sapphire Preferred, easy peasy. If you're just getting started, just get that one card. You don't have to credit card hack and get 7 cards. Not just get the one card and just let it work for you. For sure.
Keep it simple, but make sure you're getting something back in return for all your hard earned money that you're sending out, right?
And speaking of money, if you have to say, what is your biggest mistake with money while traveling? Is there one that you can pick, or more than one?
Or just in general. It doesn't even have to be during traveling.
Oh, well, I can give you an example of both. I would say in general, I'll do that one first. When I first started my first job, luckily I listened to a friend of the family because he said, put in as much into your 401k as the company will match, right? And I listened to him, which just kind of funny because I was 18 years old. I wouldn't have listened if my parents would have told me that, probably, right? But what I didn't do, I worked for that company for 8 years. I never increased the amount because I just didn't know. So I would have increased the amount for sure. I don't need to just pay that amount. I got raises and stuff. I would have increased it. So I wouldn't even have noticed the difference, right? But I just didn't know any better. So I would have done that. And then the other thing is, I worked for a company that had a high deductible health plan. And I didn't realize that you could go and get your own HSA. So that was an HSA eligible health plan, and I didn't get an HSA. And an HSA, if you're not familiar, for those of you watching, it's basically you put in pre-tax dollars and then you get to use it on medical. So essentially any gain you make in it is also not taxed. So it's like a triple tax advantaged account. And even if you're not going to use it, you think, oh, I'm healthy now, I'm 20 years old or whatever. Eventually you're going to need it. And if you don't use it and you pass away, you can give it to someone else. So it's like a win-win situation. And I didn't know that I could go and get one on my own. So I didn't do that. So I wish I would have done that because I wasted 8 years of time that I could have been doing that in my last job.
Yeah. I think the more we all learn, the more we realize, oh my God, if only I'd known this when I was 25 or when I was 20, things would be so different today. But maybe that's the beauty of us talking today and putting our stories out there. Is somebody's going to hear that and be like, oh, I didn't realize I could open my own HSA. And that to them, that's going to be a life-changing moment.
Yeah. And then as far as traveling, I definitely made the mistake, which you've probably heard about, is I chose US dollars instead of local. You go to the grocery store and it says US dollars and local. And I'm like, oh, I know US dollars. Or even now at the ATM, I don't know if this was like this before, but I realized the other day I got money out and it wanted me to convert at the ATM. And I was like, it's a huge difference. Like, I mean, the last place I went, I think it was showing 84 US dollars that it would have cost me. And it was only like 70 something in the end. So like I saved $10 by letting my bank do the conversion for me instead of doing it at the ATM.
Right. Always choose local currency. I mean, we just sort of learned that a few years ago as well. So for years, I was always doing the exact same thing. Oh, I'll just converting it right now into Canadian. That seems to be the best way. No, no.
Well, it's not familiar. So you have it familiar, but it's not the best way.
Yeah. So do you see yourself like traveling indefinitely, or do you have sort of an end in sight for your travels, or are you just going to wait and see what happens?
I think it's a wait and see. I mean, we'll see what happens. I always wanted to live abroad when I was younger. That was like my dream. So I don't know. Maybe I'll find a place that I love, or I'll find an old house in Italy. That's the thing. Whatever. Yeah, I don't really know yet. Right? Like you see other people do things, and you think, huh, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could do that. But until you see it or try it, you don't know if you're gonna like it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want somebody to do some rentals if you are paying it, I can,
I love
Lisa, she's gonna raise her and before even you know it.
love getting dirty and building things. So let me know.
Well, did you ever read the articles? This was a few, probably during the pandemic, that people were buying places in Italy for like $1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust me. We had a conversation. It didn't go well, but we had a conversation.
Well, I always wonder what the actual reality of those were.
Oh, yes. We were walking when we were on the Camino. There was quite a few places, little rural places in northern Spain that we would walk through, and there was these beautiful little towns, and there'd be houses that were clearly unlived in or for sale or whatever. And I'd always turn to Jean and be like, "Oh, do you want to buy that one? Do you want to buy this one?" He just shakes his head and keeps walking. I don't think.
Well, I even have that problem in the US. I'll be in New York, for instance, where the places you can get a place with like 200 acres and a house for $200,000 versus California, which is like 10
Yeah.
times that much, right? And you think, oh, maybe I want to buy a farmhouse and fix it up. And not sure what I would do after that, but you just have these weird dreams. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I completely understand. So, if somebody else out there is considering solo travel after reaching financial independence, what steps should they take to prepare both financially and mentally or emotionally?
I think mentally and emotionally, I'll start with that one. Um, Basically, I think preparation is key. So kind of just getting your stuff together and planning ahead a little bit helps a lot because then I think one of the bigger fears for people solo traveling is the unknown. So if you plan ahead a little bit, then obviously you can't plan too far ahead necessarily, but if you plan ahead a little bit, then it helps with that. So what I tend to do is to, book certain things in advance. And that way, when I get to the place, I don't have to worry about making decisions once I'm there. So that helps a lot. Whether it's like, I don't know, the ticket to the Louvre or something, or an airfare or accommodation, obviously. But I did travel a lot solo back in the day and I didn't book anything. So, I mean, maybe that's your way you want to do it. But personally, I think as far as like the fear of the unknown, it does help to have things booked ahead. So
And what about financially? Is there things that you can do as a solo individual in order to prepare a bit more financially?
I think a lot of the financial preparation comes in advance. So
Yeah.
hopefully by the time you've retired, you've kind of figured out what you want your monthly spend to be or how exactly you're going to manage your, I don't know, dividends coming in or bank accounts or whatever.
Do you use a lot of sites to sort of look at where you're going and see what average costs are to sort of help you plan what your budget might be for different locations?
Not necessarily. Basically what I do is I go to Airbnb and whether or not I book the thing in Airbnb or not, this is just a good tool for planning. I basically just say I want to stay a month in a place in wherever I'm going, or maybe the world, right? But I don't want to spend more than X amount. And then I look and see what my options are as far as places to go. And it's actually surprising because so I always put 1,000 and just see what comes up, and then I can increase it if I need to. But I like to kind of just see what comes up at 1,000. And I've seen places in Norway and other places like that that you may not expect, right? So it's a good kind of starting point. If you know what your budget is, you can just start with the expensive thing, just the flight and accommodation,
Right.
and then what your option are, and then go from there. Exactly.
Yeah. Actually, you can too. I didn't realize you could do that with Airbnb, like check the whole world, set a budget and see what's out there. Again, learning things right now.
Yeah, and you can put in all the things too, Like I mean, I want a kitchen, obviously. I want it to be cancelable. That's like really important to me. So
Yeah.
whatever your criteria are, you can put it all in and then you can always inch it up a little bit if nothing comes up, obviously.
Right.
It is surprising what will come up sometimes.
So, what's one unexpected skill or a mindset shift that's happened to help you thrive as a solo traveler?
I would say that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before is just figuring out how to plan things because you do it on your own. You just kind of like you're jumping right into the deep end, right? You have to figure it out. And so you just do that. So you realize kind of how resilient you are or how resourceful you are, or I don't know, like stronger than you think a lot of the time. So that kind of comes to the front right away.
That's nice. And what about like perspective? Has full time travel kind of changed your perspective of happiness and money at all or no?
I think change in perspective, everywhere I go, you learn something about a different culture. And I think that is a change in perspective. I might have been annoyed with something before or not understood something before. And I think that every place I go to, I learn a little bit more about whatever the culture is. And I think that makes you more open and understanding to people in general, because a lot of things that if you're in your home country and you're just going to work every day and you're used to your regular life, whatever might annoy you, then later on you realize, oh, well, that's why. One good example, I just had a good conversation with a guy from Ecuador, and he's married to an American woman. And we were talking about the expectation at dinner. So with him, he goes to dinner with his family, and it could last 4 or 5 or 6 hours, right? They sit around and talk. And he said sometimes they'll like go to lunch and it'll be dinner time by the time and they realize, oh, it's been 6 hours since we've just been sitting around here talking. And she's looking at her watch, right? Thinking like, yeah, said we're gonna go to your house for a couple of hours and it's been 6 hours. And he said at first they were like annoyed with each other, right? They thought, why are you like making me do this? Right. And then they realized, no, that's just two different cultural differences. And so they worked it out and figured out what the best way for them to deal with it was. But you don't know that until you meet people from other places and see how they live their lives and stuff. So that's a great perspective change, I think. If everyone should travel internationally and meet other cultures and see how other people live, because it really just opens your eyes to a lot of things.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. What's next for you? Do you see yourself continuing this lifestyle? Do you have, are you going to slow down even more and stay 3 or 4 months in a location? Or are you just going to continue like a month here, a month there? What's your vision moving forward?
Yeah, right now I think kind of the mix of slow and fast is good. So I'm kind of staying in one place for a month, and then as I travel to the next place for the month, then I might stay in 2 or 3 different places for a few days or a week or whatever. And this kind of came like what I was saying with the Airbnb. I looked and this one month, because you can put it flexible dates. So this one month was cheaper in one place, and then this one month was cheaper in another place. But there was a gap of like 8 days in between. So I just travel to the place and stay the 8 days, a few days here, a few days there. And I think that's kind of working for me because one month is great. And I do like getting to know a place a little bit better, but I do kind of still like the excitement of moving. So, but I don't think I want to be moving all the time. So I think right now I'll just continue to do that for a little while. It's a good balance. I also am hoping to do some hiking this summer, and probably it'll be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks each. And so that'll kind of interject in between the traveling and stuff. So a little bit of variety, I think, is good.
If you were to say to quantify a number of hours when you're deciding a place, does it take 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, the whole day?
A few weeks.
I think that depends. Sometimes, like when I was planning my first 6 months, I kind of just went and said, okay, well, these places are cheap for a month, so I'll book those. And they weren't necessarily close together. I knew I wanted to do some hiking in Turkey, so that was kind of like on my radar. But other than that, I wasn't really too worried about where I ended up because I knew that they were all going to be new places for me. And I can always, I don't really say, oh, I definitely want to go to Madrid or whatever. I just kind of think, oh, I'll just go wherever the price makes sense for now. And then I can fill in the gaps as I go.
Because you can always go back. That's the beauty, right, of this type of lifestyle is just because you've been to Spain doesn't mean you can't go to Spain 10 times in the future, go to different locations and see different things, right?
Exactly. Or I actually really enjoyed Leon and met a lot of people there. And they were doing some really good work with refugees and stuff. And I thought, I can always go back there. And I know I have a place there. So you never know what you're going to find until you go.
Exactly. That's true. Got to step out of your comfort zones and just go. All right. So before we wrap up, we want to get to some fun and inspirational moments that you might have had during your financial independence and your travel. So if you can look back and say, what's been your most unexpected or serendipitous travel experience so far?
Hmm. Unexpected. There's been a lot of unexpecteds, I would say. I was in Brazil and I was going I'm probably going to totally butcher this, but Lençóis Maranhenses.
Oh,
How do you say it?
Lençóis Maranhenses. Yeah, it's really, really
Okay.
good. I like it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's really beautiful, but the only way to get to where I was to get there from, I think, Jericoacoara, is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Was a Jeep tour. But what we didn't know was that the town where we were going to stop, there was no amenities, none, right? So basically, my friend and I just walked around and started like knocking on people's doors and asking if we could stay with them. And this family said yes. And we stayed in this little, I mean, it was like there were little shacks, and they let us stay in this little room, and they didn't have food or anything, but we just stayed in their house. And I don't even remember how we communicated, but like things like that, like you never know what's going to happen, right? But people are kind, and I think people are kind everywhere. I've had that happen a few different times where people have just offered to let me stay with them, or camp in their yard, or they've offered me food or whatnot. So I guess that would be the most unexpected thing, is that you never know what you're going to find. And it's amazing what you can find when you're out there. So
I love that story. That's amazing.
This is actually on our bucket list. We were trying to do this last year in 2024, going to Lençóis Maranhenses, and we didn't. And we actually have I'm already planning for 2027. No, 2026. Sorry. I'm just like you. I'm a planner, and we know that
It's on the list.
it's on the list for 2026 in Brazil.
What's one travel moment that made you stop and think, like, this is why I retired early? This is why I've chosen this life?
just kind of being able to do whatever I want and try whatever I want and not worry about the finances has been just great. So I don't know that there's a specific moment of that, but just being able to kind of take every day as it comes and do whatever comes along has been really nice. Because
Yeah.
I am a planner and I do like a lot of structure, but it's just kind of nice on the flip side to be able to say, I don't know, I'm going to do nothing today, or I'm going to do whatever somebody suggests. Or I think that freedom is, as a whole, that freedom is really nice.
And speaking of over the last year, is there a place that you can say that you picked, oh, this place changed me in some way? Do you have one specifically that comes in your mind?
Well, I have two. So definitely the first trip to France probably was just such a huge eye opener for me. I didn't really know what I was even getting into. And that was probably good, because I may have not done it if I knew all the challenges, right?
Mhm.
But of course, the challenges were overcome. And so that just realization, I think, is huge. So just that first trip was very eye opening. And then I also, after college, I decided I was going to move to London.
Mhm.
And that one was very eye opening because I don't think I understood how expensive England was. And at the time, the dollar was 2 to 1. So it was $2 to £1. And I went through my savings so fast. And I was like, what am I going to do now? Right. So I ended up moving back home in the end. But I think that was also just kind of an eye opening experience to, I had these like fanciful notions that I was going to just live in London for, all this time. And I realized very quickly that that wasn't really reality. So
Yeah.
that happens though sometimes. And then that's happening even now, because obviously there's new places and new challenges. But
Yeah.
I think learning those lessons just to kind of manage my budget better
Yeah,
is important.
for sure. And just like you mentioned before, staying flexible, right? Like being flexible to be able to go to the places that might cost a little bit less, where your money's going to go a little bit further, is really helpful too, right? Staying flexible, being able to change if you need to. And have you ever had any moments of doubt or regret about choosing financial independence and early retirement? Have you ever looked back and thought, oh, I wish I'd done this differently, or I wish I had stayed longer?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. No. I'm really glad I decided to do it. And I think, I probably should have done it earlier, but that's okay too. I don't really have any regrets.
If you were to kind of say something to yourself in the future, let's say 1 year from now or 2 years from now, what would you tell yourself?
I guess I would tell myself to just keep learning new things and putting myself in uncomfortable situations, because sometimes it's easy to just kind of sit back and not try new things because you're comfortable. I think you can relate that even retiring is a big step like that, right? Like it's unknown. And so by doing that, I think we're probably open to trying new things, I would think. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can get comfortable with your life and it's easy to just, I don't know, kind of glide through life. And I don't really want to do that. I want to keep trying new things and challenging myself and learning new things and stuff. So,
Can I ask two more last questions? The final questions. The first one is for those of you, the people who are listening to the podcast and seeing you kind of share your story with us, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to not wait any longer and just start. I know that's a very like catchphrase thing, but seriously, you're never really going to be mentally completely prepared. You just have to do it and figure it out along the way a little bit. And I think that's hard for a lot of people who are planners because we want to have everything lined up perfectly and we want to know what's going to happen. And we want to research everything to death. Just get out of the analysis paralysis and just go and do it.
And I guess the final thing is you have your own YouTube channel. So if people want to follow along with your journey and hear all about your tips and tricks and where you are in the world, where can we put on the screen where to find you and follow along on your adventures?
Yeah, they can find me at the Walking Thomas Guide on YouTube and also on Instagram, but I don't post very often there. So, but I am on there.
Excellent. So we'll link all that down below so people can look you up and follow along.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, we just want to say a huge thank you for being open and willing to come on and share your story with us and with everybody else because I think it's a real inspiration. We get questions all the time about, well, you guys are a couple. What happens if I'm a single person trying to travel and a single person achieving fire? And I think it's great that people can see it is achievable as an individual or as a couple. And just wanted to say thank you very much.
Yeah. And, if anyone has any questions, they can always find me. My email is on my YouTube channel and everything. So feel free to reach out and ask questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Amazing. Well, we won't take any more of your time because we know you want to get out and explore more of Poland. Thank you very much. Thank you again. And we'll make sure to catch up later on.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care.